All right, welcome to the show, everybody. I'm joined by my guest, Lindsay Tjepkema. She's a CEO and co-founder at Casted.us. The show topic today is the next generation of content marketing and how audio and video content are shaping the future of sales and marketing. Lindsay is the CEO and co-founder of Casted. It's the first amplified marketing platform and only B2B podcasting solution. With more than 15 years of experience in B2B marketing, she's a dynamic leader who's had tremendous success building and growing marketing teams on local and global level. So welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Well, so you and I were just talking pre-recording about Casted, and I mentioned that I think that we would be a very likely customer, but I'd love for you to give us the overview of how Casted works and how it serves the clients you serve.
Sure. So really, we're designed for mid-size on up to enterprise and very large companies with marketing teams that prioritize as part of their strategy, obviously content marketing and thought leadership. And we say, hey, what if you started with great conversations, like we're going to have today, and you use that as the center point, and you really run that out across other channels. You use those conversations, yes, for audio and video content, but really also to pull apart and use for blog content and to fuel social media, to get in the hands of your sales team, to make their sales conversations easier. And the way that we do that is we say, go again, have great conversations, record them, use whatever production partner or internal production talent you might have to turn that into great content. And then once it's all ready to go, you upload it into Casted, and we give it a house for it to live on your website. We give it a home, a microsite for all of your shows. We syndicate it, we host it and syndicate it out to Apple, Spotify, Google, YouTube. And then once it's out there, then we give you a way to pull it apart, to really amplify it across all of the channels. And that looks like transcriptions and the ability to pull audiograms and videograms. And again, just make it as much as possible, make the most out of those microsites that we create in Casted. Then what good is it all if you can't measure it? Yeah. So measurement that really matters to a brand, things that say, how are people engaging with your content? How are they consuming your content? How is it impacting revenue, pipeline, renewals? So really giving you that opportunity to build an entire content marketing strategy around this audio and video content.
That's great. So is it fair to say that the Casted is a SaaS as well as a service offering?
So we are primarily SaaS. We do have some services, but they're much more auxiliary.
Okay.
We have some managed services that we can use the platform on our customers' behalf to help them get the most out of it. We have some light production services if needed, but really it's a software platform. Okay,
great. Let's go to kind of the 30,000 foot perspective and talk about why a founder would even create a B2B podcast in the first place. What's the idea behind that?
Yeah, so you think about kind of even zooming out from there, why does any brand create content, right? So it's to educate, to engage, to entertain, all with the purpose of growing an audience of people who could become customers, who could become partners, who could become employees. It really is to build brand awareness and to build relationships with people that should be involved with your company. So if that's why you're doing content, great. You should be doing the content that's going to resonate and be embraced as much as possible by your audience. And what we're seeing, all of us are humans. We're all experiencing this ourselves. The content that we want to consume is that rich audio and video content, like what you and I are doing right now. So that to answer your question, that's why it's an engaging way. It's an engaging form of content that really builds trust and connection and relationships with your audience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I know Casted has a podcast, right? Is that correct to say?
Yeah, we have a couple actually, internal and external. Yeah.
You better, you should.
Yes.
be terrible if you didn't.
Yes.
You got to eat your own dog food, right?
Exactly.
So tell me, what are your thoughts on the founder or founders being the host or hostess of the show versus having somebody on the team host?
Yeah, I think both can be really great options. I think quite often people will jump to founder, or in larger companies, the CEO, the CMO, the VP of this, the head of that. And those certainly can be great options, but they're definitely not the only ones. What I always like to say is when you're doing any sort of content, and absolutely when you're starting a show, audio or video, it's really important to ask yourself, who is it for? and why are we doing it, right? So if your audience is for whatever reason, junior level developers that could be using your product, would you really want your CMO, for example, speaking to them? Stereotypical CMO, probably not.
Speak a different language.
Right. Now, if on the other hand, your audience is marketing leaders that are aspiring CMOs and you're marketing technology or you're a marketing agency, maybe your CMO is a really prolific, great, inspiring, marketing leader, then yes, of course. So specifically to answer your question, they can be really passionate. Founders are typically really passionate because they've jumped all in on what they're building. And quite often, yes, they can be really great. However, it's not always the case. So really think hard about who your audience is, what you're trying to achieve, and then kind of go backwards from there to understand who your best host would be.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on the personality of the person that's hosting the show? I mean, how important is it for them to be? And I guess this maybe depends on the audience, but I mean, is this something that you recommend someone that's outgoing and more engaging versus someone that's maybe scared to death to do it?
I think if people are honest, most people are scared to death to do it when they get started because it's intimidating,
sure,
it's different. But you want somebody certainly that your audience is going to be able to relate to and be entertained by. It helps to have an engaging, to have some charisma, have some energy. But I think more than anything else, it's really important to have the ability to listen, to carry on a good conversation, and to have some domain expertise so that conversation comes naturally. If I was to host a show about semiconductors, I would be completely out of my element, and I would be very canned because I would have to have all my questions written ahead of time. It's again, it kind of, like you said, it depends on who your audience is and what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think my wife is particularly excited about me hosting our show because it's making me a better listener. It's like I'm getting all these reps. Like the one thing though is like I go home and I have to like take a deep breath because I'm generally exhausted at the end of the day, especially when I've been really intently listening. But it is a skill that needs developing and that is so important. And what's also interesting is like I've seen it be helpful in sales conversations because what's weird is like I'll basically take the same style, I guess, that I have in this type of conversation, which is pretty casual, and then just use the same style in a sales conversation, which I'm not doing it intentionally. It's just natural for me, but I think it helps people be more comfortable and engaged.
I totally agree. And I've seen, among our customers and talking to people that are doing shows, when it makes sense, because your audience comes first, but in the times that it makes sense both for your audience to consume this content and for different people in your organization to host or be a part of it, it does make you a lot more comfortable talking about not only who you are and your product and your company, but also the market and like people's questions and the challenges that they're facing and new trends and just, like you said, carrying on that conversation. And I think that absolutely does translate to sales and customer relationships and product development even. It's true.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. Are you a fan of this being the center point strategy versus auxiliary for a larger business?
100%. Yeah. In fact, that's the soapbox that I get on. So 15 years in marketing, I've seen B2B, specifically B2B content marketing from every angle, from small boutique agency to doing my own consulting thing to very large enterprises. And what has happened over the last 15 years is that content marketing has always been built around this one asset, and that's your blog. And everything it's the sun of our solar system, and that's fine. Blogs are great, but it's time to provide, to give our audiences what they really want, which is, again, this rich audio and video content. So what if we put this in the center? What if we made this the sun and made everything else spin outside of that? And one, that serves the audience much more, and it's more efficient, because if you start here and clip this up and pull this over here and use the transcript to create written content here to fuel your blog and to fuel everything else, it makes your team more efficient, makes your content more effective, and makes everything much more engaging, and gives your audience ways to like dig deeper. If they listen to this conversation or watch this conversation and then want to know more, then they can get into some of that supplemental stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. let's go into your story and your background a bit. So I see from LinkedIn that it looks like you co-founded Casted in April of 19. Is that roughly correct?
We just had our second birthday, like a week and a half ago.
Happy birthday.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. So launch in April, and then fast forward to last spring, we have COVID. And I want to get there, but first, tell me about the jump from, because previously you were looks like a high level employee in the marketing space. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So like I said, 15 years in marketing, and I had, when I left to start this, I was VP of brand and content at a global company. So, and that progression had made a lot of sense. It was progressive marketing career, pretty much by the book. So and making this jump was, on one hand, it made perfect sense because of what we're doing and the personal experiences that I have had that have led to the development of the company. But on the other hand, it was quite a jump.
Let's talk about that. How did your world change, expectations, et cetera, and specifically from the perspective of being a founder versus an employee?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the hard parts, and then we'll talk about the good parts, because so much of it is there's so many positives. The hard part is,
sure,
having spent a decade and a half building this marketing career. I mean, I have education in marketing, right? Like that's been me. That's been my life. And going from that deep domain expertise to, yes, of course, I'm bringing that here because we're a marketing technology company. But jumping into, a CEO and co-founder role, truly you're learning everything, all the different areas of the business, the different aspects of a startup, raising venture capital, managing a board, recruiting co-founders, recruiting team members, hiring product, engineers and software developers. It was very, very different. And I think one of the most difficult, makes it sound like it was really, really like gut wrenching, but it wasn't. But it was a challenge, was saying, okay, I'm not the marketer of this company. We hired a brilliant VP of marketing, and she's wonderful. And obviously we work really closely together, but that's not my job, is to spend all day doing marketing. And so that was a big change. And just constantly getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning every minute of every day. That was an uncomfortable learning, right? To know that, okay, this is it. This constant like feeling your way around in the dark until you find where the light switch is. That was tough. But now that I know that that's the role, is constant learning. It's really exciting to know that the whole job is asking questions and surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you are in a certain area and being able to bring it all together. And then specifically to answer your question, going from employee to founder, it's a lot of fun, really. I mean, it's especially, you mentioned COVID, the year that shall not be named. I and we as this company had the ability to really do what we felt was the best thing for our customers and for our team, as opposed to having this pressure of a really, really large enterprise to say, yeah, but this must go on. We still have to meet at 7 a.m. for this, and meet with APAC at 9 p.m. for this. And we, in many ways, it was definitely challenging. It was definitely hard. It was definitely a crazy, crazy year. But we had the ability to be more nimble, which is freeing, So.
Oh, totally. I'm curious to know what you've learned about your own blind spots in the last 2 years.
Well, that's a good question. I have learned to see them and ask about them. I mean, I think more than, hey, this is a blind spot, it's been looking to people and actually actively expecting and reaching out and asking other people to help you see them. Like that's literally what your board is for, is to help you see your blind spots, the company's blind spots, the leadership team's blind spots, co-founders too. And I think what I've learned about them is that the more you bring them out into the light, the better. the weaker they get, the weaker the blind spot gets, meaning the stronger you get as a person.
Sure.
When you say, hey, this is a weak spot for me. Like, I don't have a background in finance. I don't have, that's a blind, it's not really a blind spot, but it's a weak spot, and I don't have a background here, I don't have a background here. And when you bring those out into the light, that's when people really want to help, and they want to come along and say, hey, your weakness, or here's a blind spot that you have, but good news, I can help. So
yeah,
that answers your question.
But I mean, that takes a degree of humility, right? To be able to acknowledge that.
Yes. Yeah. And so maybe that was a learning, is that, vulnerability, blind spots, I think that naturally goes hand in hand with being vulnerable. But when you embrace it and you say, look, everyone has them. And I think also when you are a leader, I mean, we have 30 people on our team now, when you embrace that and say, look, I have blind spots and I have weak spots, and that's why you all are here, because you make us better, and not any one of us can do this without the rest of us. And when all of us embrace that and say, hey, I'm going to ask for help, and I'm going to, go learn something, and I'm going to acknowledge my weaknesses, that gives everybody else the safety and the security to be able to do the same thing. And look, as leaders, you want your team, however large or small it is, to be able to ask questions and say, hey, I don't know how to do this thing, or, or to be able to take feedback around, like, hey, if I or somebody else on my leadership team goes to somebody else on the team and says, hey, this is a blind spot for you, let's work on it. That has to be, it's up to us to make it a safe, comfortable conversation.
Yeah. I read an article the other day, and I wish I could attribute it. I don't recall where it was from, but it was research on the correlation between the age of the founder or founding team and the success of the business. And they found generally that the older the founder, the more successful they are. And specifically comparing those that are maybe in their mid to upper 30s plus compared to early 20s. And older founders generally had a lot more success. And I can't help but think that it has to have something to do with this level of humility that not everybody, but I think a lot of us develop over time, or at least start that process. Like, I think about my ability to be humble years past was just simply and sadly not there, and like, that's you made the comment earlier, like not being the smartest person in the room, like that, it does require a degree of humility, and that's not an insignificant attribute. So would you say, can you echo that, or do you feel a little bit differently in terms of, like, if Lindsay was the CEO, co-founder of Casta a decade ago, would it have been a different journey?
Well, I don't know what you're trying to say, because I'm 21 right now. So no, I'm 38, very proudly 38, and I agree. I think, of course, like let's just put it out there that we're stereotyping. So, like, stereotypically, yep. I mean, I think there are a lot of situations, I know myself for sure, earlier in my career, you feel like you have a lot to prove, right? And
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And that's, maybe that's age, maybe that's time in your career. I don't know, but speaking for myself, the farther I go back, the more I feel like I had to prove. Whereas now it's like, look, I've been there, and I have seen firsthand that when I show up and say, look, this is what I have, this is what I'm bringing to the table, this is what I need. And the people that can provide that thing that you need, they want to be at the table too, and like they can bring those things, and we truly are, it sounds so cheesy, but you truly are better together. And when everybody says in one hand, this is what I have and this is what I need, usually you collectively have a pretty nice full table. And in the areas that you don't, that's where it's like, okay, well, we need to hire for that, or we need to outsource that, or we need to learn that. It's when everybody kind of hides the things behind their back and says, oh, I know everything that I need to know, and it's just peacocking and trying to prove what they know, which I think stereotypically does happen earlier in your career, when later on in the game you're like, no, like it's not worth it. It's more stressful to try to act like I know everything. It's exhausting. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how maturity and wisdom develops. It's weird. Like I've known and know 30-year-olds that have far more maturity and wisdom than 60-year-olds. So it's not always equal to age, and not necessarily even always equal to life experience. But I think generally we see that. But I don't know, it feels different. Like each day I feel less and less like I need to be the star, right? Like that. And I feel this deep sense of appreciation for our team. And then this like weight of responsibility too. And I'd like to get into that, because like and you can relate to on the personal level. Like I am married. I have a total of 5 kids, 2 of which are grown. But like there's a weight of responsibility there, but there's some corollary between that, like family life and in our team, our business team, our teams on our business. I'm curious how you feel about that and sort of the weight that you feel as a founder to be successful.
Yeah, I think the way you said it sums it up. I mean, like it's a freedom, but it's also, it is a weight. And I look at this team and it blows me away. Like right now, I haven't even been in the same room as them yet, but we have, 30 people, and I look at them on this Zoom screen and they're building each other up and they're collaborating and they're asking for what they need and they're giving credit and kudos to each other. And it's just like, and I just take a step back and it's like, these people are doing it. This team, this brilliant, amazing, talented team, they're the ones that are doing this. And, it's up to me, therefore, to just get out of their way, but also fuel them and give them what they need and give them the resources. And it really is an interesting place to be. And I think you talked about kind of the difference between employee and founder. I was talking about something similar with somebody else. And it's interesting because I think my experience as an employee is that there is a pressure. You're in a little bit more of a box, and it's somebody else's schedule, especially a large company, somebody else's schedule, somebody else's vision, somebody else's priorities, somebody else's strategy. Even if you're leading a team, you're leading an initiative, you're leading a department, it's fitting in between 2 things. Whereas and I think there is an expectation, at least in my experience, where you should know more. And it's like, what do you mean you don't know how to put a budget together? Or you've never done this strategy before. Like, I hired you to do this thing. Whereas a founder, there's an expectation that you don't know what you're doing. And I think it's important for those of us in this situation to remember that with all of this pressure and with all of this responsibility does come a certain amount of freedom and permission to ask a lot of questions. And I think that we need to remember that feeling, those of us who have had it, of like being in the other person's shoes of like, this person's expecting me to know things. And again, going back to that psychological safety of like, it's impossible for you to know everything. And even if it's a surprise to me or someone else, your leader, that you don't know this thing that we thought you should know, I really want you to ask. And like, let's get that solved, because it is, that's one of the biggest changes that I think comes as being a founder. It's expected that you are going to be asking a ton of questions and figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I've observed as an interesting point in the transition from employee to founder also is that as an employee, I felt a sense of achievement at times when I was successful, when I created something or did something that ended up being successful or contributed value to the company. And now I have many more of those like proud dad moments, proud mama moments, where it's like, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing I do, is mentor and guide my teams. Like the moment that they're sort of released into the wild and I see that they've done something that's just so good. Like it's weird because it's like, it's this transition from, me performing to like encouraging, supporting, helping the team perform. And then to see that moment where they get it and it's like your kiddo hits a home run at a baseball game. It's like, it's just such a good moment. Yeah. And that's a joy that I just didn't experience as an employee.
Yeah, I think so. And I think especially when you you start the company, it was me and my co-founders, and then, a couple employees, and when you see them start to interact and collaborate in ways that wouldn't have existed if this team didn't exist, and start to go out and have wins and successes and share, important personal and professional milestones with each other, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this is... this whole show, of course, is unscripted and you don't know what's coming, but I'm curious what you would say about your big why. Like why are you doing this in the first place? Like if you go really deep, like what's the purpose of all of this? Like I get that we need to make money in business. I get that, but like what is your deep, and if that's it, there's nothing wrong with it, that's fine. But I'm just curious, like what makes you tick, what drives you, what propels you forward? Yeah,
I think, there's a couple answers to that question. Certainly there's the marketing opportunity, and I see it, and I really truly do believe that, we have the opportunity to introduce the next generation of content marketing. That's that one. And then, myself and my co-founders, the first time that we met and talked about this thing, and I already knew that I was doing it, and I was looking for somebody to like kind of come along with me. And when we met, it was like, we spent the first 15, 20 minutes talking about that market opportunity and the rest talking about the culture we could build and the team we could build and the opportunity we could create. And it was like, okay, so there's that why, right? And for me personally, I had this conversation with my friend / coach when, before any of this was even a thing, talking about what I was going to do next and what I really wanted to do. And was it this next step or this one? And this wasn't even something that I thought of, but she really helped me boil it down, like by one of those exercises that kind of like, yeah, but why? And what she helped me to realize, what she helped me to realize is that for me, what I care most about is creating something that didn't exist before. And sometimes that's something really creative and tangible, like decorating my office or, creating something beautiful. Some other times it's, creating a team, creating a product. But to me, that's what keeps fueling me, is that this is all net new. It's creation, it's being creative, it's making something. And I think that's it for me. And then you get into like the really personal things, and like especially this last year, I have 3 boys. They've literally been here watching it all, and they're as much a part of Casted as the team is, and the team's others and pets and kids and things like that. And that's really cool too, is helping them to truly see you can do it. You can do anything.
Yeah. I want to go there. I want to talk about family life, but before I do, I want to hit on something you just said. So let me see if I can phrase this in a way that makes sense. So I think what I hear you saying is you like to create, you like to sort of start something, build something, and there's a creative element. And also I would argue probably there's a degree of novelty involved in that. Mm-hmm. So how does that play out? Like if we fast forward down the line, maybe several years, even 5 to 10 years, do you see a point where maybe you've exhausted that novelty within Casted, and then that would leave you sort of aching for something different or new or more? Or do you think within the ecosystem of Casted, there's always enough novelty to sort of keep you going and keep you motivated?
Yeah. I think it's always there. I mean, I think the opportunity for us and for what we're doing, and truly this category that we're creating, this next generation content marketing, I mean, that's a big bite. That's a big bite. But truly, even within that, there's so many features and iterations and brand building and team, right? I mean, this team, culture's never on autopilot, right? And so, there's always going to be opportunities to be better for our team and to be a better company for them and for what they deserve and the workplace that they deserve, and ways to show up even more for them. So I think it's going to last. I think it'd be quite a while before we exhausted it.
Yeah, I can totally see that. The rabbit hole goes really deep for sure. Mm-hmm. Let's transition to family. I was on my way home the other day, and I'm in Denver and have a really beautiful drive on the way home. It's mountainous, and I just turned off the music, and I just was thinking. And 2 of my girls are going into high school this fall. And it just suddenly struck me, like I had this sudden sense of urgency, like, oh my gosh, like this is the final chapter of childhood. And I felt this sudden urgency to be there, like more than I have for them in the past, and to orchestrate my schedule and life around that. And I felt convicted to some extent about my past choices. I'm like, that sense of like, I know we can't be perfect, but just that sense of like, dang, like I can't get those previous years back when I missed a lot of time, but I do have control over the future. So that kind of started a journey and conversations with my wife and my girls. Like, how can we do this? One of the things we started doing is like door dashing together, which has been so much fun. So we'll take turns, and they're both 14. And I drive and they do the running or whatever. But so, and we split the money. Half of it goes to extracurriculars, half of it goes towards their paycheck or whatever. But my big, it's awesome. My big play though is I get to spend time with them. And it's productive. Like it's, and I love driving. So like, that's fun too. But anyway, I'm curious, like, how do you reconcile, like, there is that weight of responsibility at work, but you're a mom, you have 3 boys. I think you mentioned in another show, you have a 10-year-old and 2 twin 7-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, so that's a lot of responsibility. So what are your thoughts on family, work-life balance, and how do you see that?
Oh, goodness. I feel like anything I say, I'm going to be a hypocrite because, like, I feel the same way. Like, I feel like it's never enough.
Join the club. Yeah.
I think that's part of it. When you care, that's what happens. Of course. it's funny that you said like driving around and stuff. I got advice from somebody at one point to look for the little moments. Like, of course, the big wonderful family vacation is amazing, and doing the thing that your kid loves more than anything else. Weekly chess, like my kid would love to like go to a coffee shop and play chess with me every Saturday. And like, I want to believe that that's possible, but I know that that's probably not feasible. She was like, look at the little things when you need to run to, go get gas, be like, hey, hop in the car with me. We're going to go get gas. Why? Because I'm your mom and we're going to go get gas. And like those little, like driving my kid to and from swimming, which is 10 minutes. We have the best conversations because it's just me and him. And I just tried really hard to embrace that in like bedtime, when they all get really chatty at bedtime, and just try, again, this sounds really cliche, but just really try to be present with, it's like the overused word of the last 3 years, but just be present, and if that's reheated leftovers that you feel like I feel like a failure at dinner, but we're present, and that gets me to like sit down and snuggle up with them. That's what matters, and that's what they're going to remember. And I wish I had it more figured out, but I think especially over this last year, like I mentioned, they were physically here. And when we raised Series A, they knew what that was. They didn't know all the intricacies or like what it all meant. But I'm like, remember how like a lot of times I had my office closed and I said, hey, don't open the door because I'm talking to an investor. That's done, and we did it. And they were like, yay, and they got it, and they were physically here, and that's pretty cool. So
yeah, that's awesome. Are you a fan in general of kind of crafting a precise schedule and following it? I mean, just your normal, and this is related to what we're talking about, but also to the extent that you fashion your day. Like, are you a fan of just kind of sort of reactive approach, or do you strictly schedule your day, or how do you handle that?
I'm a fan of it, but I don't do it. I feel like it's a luxury I have not had the last year or so, because everything's gotten thrown up in the air. I mean, like, sometimes the kids are here, sometimes they're not, and sometimes my husband's here, and sometimes he's not. I think in a perfect world with my personality type and knowing in the past what's worked best is I really do like to sit, plan out my day, and know what I'm going to do, and kind of mentally prepare and get in state of mind. And I'm a very big to-do list person, and kind of block out parts of my day where I know I'm going to be more focused versus other parts of my day where I'm going to be more chatty but less focused. And that's there. But I think kind of like a lot of the rest of us, there's so much going on personally and professionally that we're all just figuring it out. And I think honestly, that's been kind of good for me. This type A, high D, achiever person, to say, what, sometimes you just need to roll with it, and it's going to be fine. That makes me a little crazy to be living that way, I say.
Yeah. I love that perspective. This segues back to humility, but the idea that we're not expected to be experts on everything, and we are just figuring it out. We're experimenting with different things and making adjustments, et cetera. Like, that is the path, It's just, I think it's an important thing to remember.
It's true. And I think quite often, we're like, again, back to generalizing and stereotypes and stuff. I think if you're a founder, you probably are an achiever. You've got some like of those type A tendencies, and I think that we tend to be our own biggest critics. And for sure, regardless of what area your thing is, if it starts to slip, or you're not on top of it, or you're not intentional on it, you feel like it's bad. And I think we all a little bit more room for grace for ourselves, I think, is probably a good thing. Yeah.
That reminds me, and we'll land this plane soon, but I'm reminded of the idea of kind of attaching your results or attaching your worth to the results and expectations. One place that I recognize this isn't for everybody, and you may well have a different approach, but my co-founder and I have tried to be, I guess, non-specific in our goals or the results we're trying to achieve and things that we don't have control over. So, because I feel like most of the time in life when we're disappointed, and this is broadly applicable, it's as a result of unmet expectations. So where we more try to go is, we're going to show up every day, and we're going to work hard, and we're going to work on the highest and best areas that we can focus on, try to make wise decisions in the day. and then just see what comes of it. And it's like, we've been on this journey, and for 5 months, we didn't bring on a new client, and we've brought on 4 in the last 2 weeks, which is just crazy. But like, during that period kind of in the desert, we had to have faith that we were doing the right things. We just keep going. But I think it helped to get through, to not be married to any sort of, precise expectations. So I'm curious how you think about that.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to trust. And there's several conversations we could have here about like how to find your right co-founders and who to bring on your team, and even investors and board members. Like, there has to be trust there, that during those 5 months, and we've had those ups and downs too, everyone does, if you don't have trust that the people, whoever those people are doing their best, and they don't trust that you're doing your best, that's where the problems happen. Because if it's truly, we are doing the right things, we just need to keep on keeping on, that's a very different conversation than are the right people here, or you're not pulling your weight.
So true, yeah.
When it really, those are all different versions, different ways of saying I don't trust you, right? And so that's first and foremost. And yeah, we're venture backed, we're high growth SaaS, so we have things we have to do, but I think all the time, no matter what situation you're in, if you have a very clear North Star, this is where we're headed. You have clarity of focus, so we need to say no to these things, we need to say yes to these things, and we trust each other. That's what it comes down to. And you have to, trust has to be maintained. I have to maintain the trust of our board and the trust of our investors, so that they believe that we're doing the best that we possibly can. And I think when you have that, that's when you can do those things, like you said, is keep on keeping on, and know that you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, it's tough, and it really requires a significant degree of discernment. I don't know if you've seen, there's this meme where this little guy is digging, like tunneling underground with his pickaxe. And he's like this close to hitting the diamonds, and he quits and turns back. So like there's that idea of like, no, you're so close, don't give up. But then there's also the sunk cost fallacy, and the idea of like tunneling the wrong direction completely, and the sooner you stop that and go the right direction, the better. So it's like it requires discernment to tease that out. And maybe that's the pro of having multiple founders, a board, et cetera, to navigate that, because it's so important.
It is. And to your point, not every business, not every founder, not everything should have several founders. We have 3 co-founders, we have a board, we have investors. That's not the right model for everybody. But I do think everybody needs other people, even if that's an unofficial person in your life. Somebody else who knows this, that can watch it from other angles, because talked about blind spots earlier. Yeah. Hopefully you aren't alone digging a tunnel by yourself. Hopefully you have other people with some sonar, somebody with a map, somebody else who's kind of holding light for you, so that you aren't on your own to make those decisions, because that's when guessing happens. And hopefully you have other people to help take the guessing out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting, so in my past, I worked for a private equity firm, and we bought multiple SaaS businesses. And part of my role was to evaluate the prospectus. And a good friend and former business partner of mine, we call it outside eyes. He came up with this term, outside eyes. And it's so interesting. Like, even if and this isn't like some special gift of mine, I think it's just generally true, but even if I knew almost nothing about the business, if I looked at the prospectus, there's a unique perspective that I had that the founder didn't, because they couldn't see the forest for the trees. Mm-hmm. And so I think it could be really useful to have a trusted network to get outside eyes on your business or a specific problem, to try to get some wisdom on that. Absolutely. And I think, again, going to humility and vulnerability, and that's easier said than done for a lot of people, because it's like, but what if people see how uncertain I am, or how bad we're doing over here, or our weak spots over there. Yeah. The more we normalize those communities and those need for connections and outside eyes, the better our businesses will be, for sure. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, Lindsay, I'd like to end with one question, and that is, I'm curious what advice you would give yourself maybe 10 years ago. If you could go back and speak to Lindsay a decade ago, what would you tell her? Gosh, well, she would only be 11, right? Since I'm only 21 now. Right. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, so 28-year-old me. Actually, that's when I had my first son. And I think, there's a lot of uncertainty all the time. I think that was, in particular, a time of uncertainty for me, a new mom, trying to figure out what was next for my career. And I think I would encourage myself and for others to embrace that uncertainty and to know that the path that you think you're on and the path you think you need to be on are probably wrong. They're probably going to take some twists and turns. They're going to get bumpy. You're going to go off the path for a while. And, where you think you're going to end up, all of that is probably not what you think. And that's okay. Just to your point, keep on keeping on. Surround yourself with people that, those outside eyes and those trusted advisors, and you'll end up where you need to be, because this is not, this wouldn't have been on my path. and it's exactly where I need to be.
I think I lost you there for a second, Lindsay, but you're back. Thank you. That's good stuff. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to have all of the links to Casted, link to your LinkedIn on the landing page. Is there anywhere that the people that are interested in the product should go, or maybe just founders that want to say hello? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Sure, yeah. Casted.us is our website. We have podcasts there that you can listen to and lots of other content as well. You can find me at Casted Lindsay on Twitter and Instagram. You can find Casted on Twitter at GoCasted. And you can find me on LinkedIn too.
Great. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. You have an extreme amount of wisdom to share, and I appreciate you being so gracious with us.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.